I'm not the house of cards that falls down easily. Oh, I'm strong enough to handle what you throw at me.
Welcome to Mental Health News Radio. I'm your host, Kristin Sunanta Walker. Just what are we going to discuss? The intimacy that is mental health. Let's continue to make it as comfortable as discussing brain health or heart health. This show has been on the air for several years, and we have amazing co-hosts. And then we created a network of podcasters on mentalhealthnewsradionetwork.com, a place where every possible facet of mental well-being can be talked about openly. My show, after several hundred interviews, the format is this: intimate, deep, funny, touching, sometimes uncomfortable, but always vulnerable conversations with interesting people. The goal is to have you, our listening family, many of you who have become my good friends, feel as though you are listening in on private conversations. Thank you for tuning in and becoming part of this amazing journey with me, and now with our network of podcasters. Just knowing this podcast might be helping any of you realize you are not alone on this journey called being a human being makes doing this podcast worth every second.
After all, we promised we'd be cordial.
Hi, everyone. Kristin Walker here. We are on with a podcaster on the network who does many, many other things. He's been on before, but it's been a while, so we're going to get a really great refresher. This is part of our First Responders in Mental Health series on the network. Ken Falke, thanks so much for coming back on the show.
Oh, thanks for having me, Kristin.
Absolutely. And Barry, of course, Barry Toon with Stepstone Connect. Thank you so much for being my lovely co-host.
Great to be with you as always.
So, Ken, we met maybe a couple years ago or a year ago.
I think 2 years ago we met and did our first podcast, and then we started our podcast, with you guys. I guess it's been a year now.
Yeah. I'm so glad. Can you give our listeners a refresher on your book and also, what you guys do at Boulder Crest?
Yeah. So just a quick background. I'm a retired Navy combat veteran. I spent 21 years in the U.S. Navy as a bomb disposal guy. Got out of the Navy, ran a counterterrorism consulting business that ended up doing pretty well, and we sold the company and really have been focused on kind of the philanthropic side of our lives since we sold the company. And my wife and I, early in the war, started a charity just to take care of severely wounded, mostly physically wounded bomb disposal troops from the military. And that led us to, from about 2010 to 2012, were the worst years for amputees in Afghanistan. And we live about an hour west of D.C., and it led us into this hosting families from Walter Reed and Bethesda hospitals out to our home. Again, these were families of young men and women who had lost limbs in combat. Not a single limb, but sometimes double leg amputees. We had, just in our small bomb disposal community in the military, we had 4 triple amputees, and Taylor Morris, who lost all 4 limbs, a quadruple amputee. And we decided to donate 37 acres of our property and build this retreat for these families on our farm, just adjacent to our farm. And that's called Boulder Crest Retreat. And we've been running programs there primarily for folks who are dealing with the aftermath of war, PTSD-related programs. Our flagship program is something called Warrior Path. And I say flagship because it's got a formalized curriculum. It is a training program, not a therapy program. And it also has an 18-month study that's been done on it by 2 clinical psychologists, and some really cool articles that have been written on it. And Josh and I have been asked a lot. Josh Goldberg runs something that we run 2 retreats today, one in Arizona and one here in Virginia. And then the third thing we run is something called the Boulder Crest Institute for Posttraumatic Growth. And Josh Goldberg runs that, who is really my right-hand man in the organization. And we had talked and had a lot of people ask us, do you think the program we're doing for the military would work for civilians? And we said, absolutely. For a lot of reasons. One is we've had a former NFL football player come through the program who did very, very well and is still doing very, very well 4 years later.
Nice.
Well, as we talked about scaling, which is what, most groups like us try to do, is to be able to take these services out. we decided that one of the quick ways we could do that would be to write a book. So we wrote a book. It's called Struggle Well, Thriving in the Aftermath of Trauma. It's based on the science of post-traumatic growth. And it's really a story, a little bit of Josh's and my personal story, but it's really a story about how humans in times of struggle can go on to do some really remarkable things. And that's been on the market now for just over a year.
So how has the response been to the book?
Well, it's, books are funny things nowadays. It's, publishers, unless you're somebody really famous and somebody pays you a lot of money to publish a book, most people are hybrid publishing and self-publishing, and that's kind of what we do. And based on a lot of my friends who have written books, I think we've done very, very well. I know how many people in this country are suffering with depression and anxiety and PTSD, and I think it would be nice to sell, 10 times what we've sold. But we've sold over 6,000 books.
Good for you.
In a lot of way. And the most rewarding thing about this book is because we didn't do it for money. We did it because we're trying to help people. And,
right.
And you don't make much money on books anyway.
No, not anymore.
But the bottom line is that what's so rewarding to us is when you read the Amazon reviews on the books, or somebody out of the blue connects with you on Facebook or LinkedIn and tells you how the book saved their life. And it's that really, warms the heart.
Absolutely. I mean, since Amazon, the publishing industry will never be the same. But yeah, you've got to do it for the right reasons, which you guys have. I know, and I asked about this last time, but this always piques my interest, being the horse person, late in life horse person that I am. But are you still utilizing horses in your programs?
We do, yeah. We have 3 horses in Virginia and about 15 out in Arizona, but they play a critical role. Our Warrior Path program is 7 days long and a total of 74 and a half hours of contact time with the instructors.
Wow.
And so it's like, in therapy terms, it's like 16 months of therapy tucked into a 7-day a 7-day program. And
speaking of first responders, that's one driving. I can hear the siren.
Yeah. We use these horses for 3.5 hours out of the 74.5-hour program as really a place of teaching connection and kind of this nonverbal communication strategy. And we go straight from the horses into a verbal communication class. And it's really an interesting, connection. And horses, I tell everybody, we love dogs. I love therapy dogs. We have 2 trained ones that live with us all the time that we take down to the retreat and visit. But, dogs are, in fact, codependent animals. They rely on you for food. They rely on you for love. They rely on you to take them to the vet. Horses are pretty independent, and one of the bad things in a PTSD or relationship is codependent relationships, and I worry a lot about that. We haven't done enough research on dogs, but the horses, they just know. They are really able to connect. They're really able to open people up, and I've seen some amazing results come out at the time with the horses, and I don't think we'll ever not use them, I guess.
It's amazing to me. It's such as my horse does that kind of work with someone who's an Igala trained person and then also a psychologist. And it's amazing to see. I've seen things happen that are just kind of unbelievable, otherworldly, even in terms of just what someone's been able to, to overcome just by being in an arena with a horse, just them and the horse for however long the session is.
We had a guy, Chris, and we had a guy as tough as a man could be. He was in the Army for 30 years. He spent 22 of those 30 years at Delta Force. And then the rest in the 82nd Airborne. So, his whole career, he was a soldier and a warrior. And this guy came to us, and he had sunglasses on and a backpack. From day one, he wanted to run. He wanted to leave.
Yeah.
Friends had pushed him here, to come to the program. And so our horses occur on Monday. Our program starts on Friday night. Our horse module is Monday afternoon. And I came into dinner Monday afternoon, and it was, I don't know, 5 o'clock ish. And I didn't even recognize the guy because he had no sunglasses and no rucksack. And I sat down with the guys because I don't teach the program. I just pop in and out to say hi when the guys are here. And I sat down with this group of guys at this table, and I was really struggling to know this guy because I'd met him a couple of days earlier, but these sunglasses had thrown me off. So, I finally realized who it was, and we talked and had a great dinner, and he was smiling, a completely different body language than what he had the first couple of days.
Wow.
So that evening, I went to the instructors, and I said, what happened to Colin? And they said, you wouldn't believe it until they showed me a video of what happened. But anyway, they were in this horse ring with the 6 guys that were in the program. He had his sunglasses on. The horse trainer asked him to remove his sunglasses because horses like to see your eyes. And he did. And he had his arms crossed. He was very tense in body language. And one of our horses, Gabriel, walked over to him, put his snout under Colin's arms, lifted his arms 3 times before his arms finally kind of busted apart. He was holding them pretty tight. And they said as his arms broke apart, his frown just went to a smile from ear to ear.
Wow.
And tears started flowing, and it literally changed this guy. And that's what the power of these things can do. It's unbelievable.
Barry, when you're, doing what you do with Stepstone Connect, are you also dealing with veterans? I mean, I know you are if they are also first responders in terms of EMTs or firemen or policemen, but are you also dealing with people that are just straight up they're in the military?
Yes, in fact, increasingly so. My business partner and I spoke recently at Utah's annual conference for the VA, and we've been doing a lot of work with them, and we've got some therapists, Ken, you'd probably be interested in this, who've done a lot of work with the Wounded Warrior Project, and some who've got military backgrounds and have spent time in the military. So it's increasingly a big part of what we're doing. While maybe 2/3 is first responders, a big part of it is veterans. The work that the VA has done on PTSD is so extraordinary and was so cutting edge that it's been a pleasure to be involved with that organization. And I hearing Ken talk and just being able to be a part of this today has been a real treat for me. So
good. Ken, let's talk about, struggling, because in our society today, with all of this look outside of yourself to find, peace within, which never works. It seems like, you want the easy route, not you personally, but that just seems like what society kind of pushes you to. You have such a different message about utilizing struggle as something that's wonderful to have in your life. You don't run away from that, dig in. So how do you get that message across? Well, actually, I want to ask you first, what led you to learn that and know that was a truth for yourself? And then how do you get that across to people that are like, hey, listen, I don't want to struggle?
Well, I'll remind you of the journey. I had a level of frustration with traditional mental health. And I did a lot of research, and Barry's right. The VA's done, some amazing research on PTSD, but so have a lot of other doctors around the nation. And I literally bought a plane ticket and I went on a journey. I went to Harvard, I went up to Mass General, I went over to the University of Chicago, San Francisco. I went out to a program in Napa Valley called Pathways Home. It was a 6-month inpatient PTSD and drug and alcohol rehab program, down to UCLA, down to San Diego. And I talked to psychiatrists and psychologists and PhD social workers, and I heard over and over again, and I still hear it today, from individuals. It's never in a big audience, but normally in one-on-one meetings that what we're doing doesn't work. The prolonged exposure to cognitive processing therapy, the dropout rates are horrendous, the sticky part of the therapy, sticking, for years afterwards, doesn't work, and very few long-term successes out of these traditional approaches. And during my research and prior to this trip, I had read this research about a guy named Rich Tedeschi at the University of North Carolina in Charlotte. And Tedeschi had studied and coined a term 40 years ago now, 35 years before I met him, called posttraumatic growth.
Hey listeners, a quick but important notice for all the shows that we'll be doing for our first responders. In 2018, the number of police officers, firefighters, EMTs, and veterans, anyone who's considered a first responder, who died of suicide was greater than the combined total killed in the line of duty. More attention is being paid, but help is often elusive. Even with more available resources, those who are first in line to help us actually asking for help for themselves, that can be the hardest thing for them to do. Mental Health News Radio Network is working with Stepstone Connect to give voice to our incredible first responders. Stepstone Connect is an organization born of the belief that accessibility and confidentiality will eliminate traditional barriers to treatment. Privacy and the peace of mind that comes with it, combined with easy, everywhere access, underlines Stepstone's mission and treatment philosophy. It's simple. With access to the internet and a device with a camera, you're a click away from leading mental health clinicians who specialize in the treatment of PTSD and other trauma-related injuries for first responders and their families. If you or someone you care about is struggling, please don't let another day pass before discovering what Stepstone can do. Stronger connections, everywhere access, stepstoneconnect.com. You can find out more by going to their website, stepstoneconnect.com, or call 800-495-3761. Now back to the show.
And Tedeschi had studied and coined a term 40 years ago now, 35 years before I met him, called posttraumatic growth. And I was really intrigued by the term. For a lot of reasons. I'll tell you those personal ones in a second, but I was intrigued by the term, so I added him to my trip and journey, and most of Tedeschi's research was about families who had lost children to cancer, which arguably is the worst thing that can happen in your life, right? To lose a child. My mom died when I was 7 years old, and I can remember my grandfather till the day he died saying things like, you should never bury your child, you should never child should never, die before you do, and all these kind of things. So I get it, that's a family I came from. But I said to Tedeschi, it's hard for me as a military guy who spends most of my time with the military guys, to get that story to resonate. I said, hey, Rich, have you ever done any research on military folk? And he said, yeah, I actually studied prisoners of war from the Vietnam War. Similar to losing a child in the way of severity, if you will, of trauma. I can't think, as a combat veteran and as a guy who's been through SEER school, which is the school where they teach you how to behave if you do get captured in war, or how to escape. I can't think of anything worse in combat than being captured and tortured on the battlefield. And not like terrorists do today for 24 hours, but these Vietnam vets, they were in prison camps for 6
years.
Every bone in their body broken, molested, starved. One guy telling me he had boils on his eyes for 2 years. He couldn't see out of his eyes. And, it's just, I kept thinking, this is amazing. What did you find out? To Tedeschi, I said, what did you find out during this research? And he said, well, 30% of Vietnam vets came home from war with PTSD, which arguably that percentage is true for our current generation. And he asked me, he said, how many prisoners of war do you think came home with PTSD? And I didn't even take a breath. I said 100%. And he said, no, it wasn't 100. And I said 90, 80. Finally got down to 30%. And he said, he held up 4 fingers. And I said, are you telling me that it was only 4%? And he said, yeah. And he goes, and I'll make it even more complicated for you. The 4% that were diagnosed with PTSD were the ones that were in captivity for the least amount of time.
Oy.
So now I'm thinking, well, how did this happen? And he simply said, when I asked him the question, how do you account for that? He said, training. And then my brain kicked in. I thought, well, training, I know a lot about training. At the height of the war, my company trained 45,000 soldiers a year going into combat. So I know a lot about training. I know a lot about scaling training. And I said, I know something about training, Rich. And I said, I'm not really happy with the way therapy programs work. Do you think we could take your post-traumatic growth framework and teach people through a training program, teach them how to live a meaning and productive life? Because what we believe the truth is that the opposite of suicide is living a great life. If you're living a great life, you won't take your own life. And that, to me, starts to resonate with how you create a program, how you create a training program. So post-traumatic growth is, dates back to biblical times. I mean, as far back as, in the Bible, there's references for, post-traumatic growth all throughout it, including, Jesus' own sacrifice. But the truth is, one of my favorite books and where it really started to resonate with me was a Holocaust survivor by the name of Viktor Frankl, who was a psychiatrist, wrote a book called Man's Search for Meaning. And he talks about, his trauma in these
Absolutely.
We
love Viktor Frankl around here. Yeah.
Yeah. So, it's my favorite book, and then it's starting to resonate, and I'm thinking, okay, Frankl did it. Prisoners of war from Vietnam did it. Why can't we teach everybody how to do it? So that's kind of what started. And really, the simple side of struggle is that, to simplify it, I guess, is that what struggle does for us is it gives us this ability to stop and think about what's going on. And as this thinking starts to occur, to figure out what you need to do to muster through it. And that's why, an easy life's not great, because when things are just easy and you hit hard times, which everybody will in some form or fashion, it's just hard to recover if you haven't had these speed bumps. And that's all the struggle is some speed bumps. And,
right.
And what we're trying to do is really teach people how to get through these speed bumps a lot quicker than most of them are taught to do.
It helps you to have this tool bag or this tool chest or this tool rucksack that you carry around with you from going to counseling, from going through programs like yours. To me, it's this, okay, I'm going to go through struggles. I'm going to deal with horrific struggles that I'm still processing from my past in my present day. But now I have a bag full of tools that I can use to help me when those struggles come up, and they always will. It's not like a pass or here's the antidote to struggling. There is no such thing. It's just, do you want to struggle well, like you say, or do you want to struggle and, maybe not get up, want to get up?
No, we say, if you imagine, let's just say it maybe as an analogy, the road, or maybe even easier, a bowling lane with the gutters on each side of a bowling lane. And you roll the ball down the lane, and if you can't struggle well, what ends up happening is your ball goes in the gutter. But if you put those inflatable things like they do for kids in the gutters, and think of those two inflatable gutters as, really what we would refer to as your network of 3 to 5. We believe that, people, what makes us happiest and what makes people strongest in life is to have great relationships. We think that number is about 3 to 5 relationships, because you can't get too many.
Right.
On the other gutter, it's really these wellness practices, or what you refer to, I think, as tools. And, this ability to meditate, to breathe, to muster, enough energy through these things, to exercise.
Yeah.
Those are the real two things that I keep telling people you got to get right. And we refer to them as not tools, but wellness practices, and time with horses, time in the outdoors, maybe time with a therapist, time with a friend, whatever it might be.
Right.
But those are the two things that kind of keep us in that lane. And that's what we try to get people to understand and to really build strongly. Because if you can build this really good 3 to 5, and you have, people that are strong in your life that you can turn to when times are tough, you may not have to go see a professional.
Exactly. I've got people and what do I have access to? Like the best on the planet, right? And I thank God I can call. Some of them are, a couple of them are in my, my 3 to 5. I'm more like 10, and I used to have no one. So, but that's my maximum, is having that 10 core of 10. But I can call them and just be a mess. Today, be a total mess. Everything's going wrong. I'm freaking out. Da 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 da. And there's no amount of shame. There's no me feeling bad about that later. I know that I can call my people, and that is so beneficial. That is so beneficial, because the work that you do, the work that Barry does, the work that I do, like, we're carrying a lot on our shoulders.
Yeah.
Plus what we went through on top of it and our own stuff. I mean, it does get to you after a while, and you have to have those people. Like, nobody has got it all figured out. If they say that they do, they are in denial or they're lying. It's just not reality.
I will say I've got a friend of mine who 1974 Harvard Medical School graduate, psychiatrist. I mean, is, super intelligent. He calls himself a reformed psychiatrist. He doesn't practice. He actually left the field to go teach leadership classes because he was so frustrated. But he was telling me in the late 70s and early 80s, the joke in therapy in the psychiatric community, which scared me actually, they used to call psychiatrists rent-a-friends, and here we are. We've got people around us that can provide that soundboard, and that the thing about therapists and people that can help you, more professionals that can help you, is that they're normally great listeners. And that's one thing that our friends don't always bring to bear. And
Right.
a lot of friends are quick to give you, advice. And we talk a little bit about this in our book. But if you can get 3 to 5 people that understand you, are good listeners, won't judge you, won't shame you, won't guilt you, that's more powerful than any professional you'll walk into.
Absolutely. And my God, get the professional help. There is no shame in that either. I have absolutely no problem, going and getting what I've been many times. So for me now, it's tune-ups as needed.
Yeah.
And I have no problem sitting there going, I am so glad that I am paying you to listen to me for an hour.
Well, some of us, Kristin, need more than occasional tune-ups. Some of us
That's
need
right.
weekly tune-ups, like myself.
I will. Give me
I've got
another month.
I've got a question for you. The post-traumatic growth discussion here is really fascinating. I probably should know more of Richard. I don't, but I do recall. Is he affiliated with Lawrence Calhoun?
Yeah, they were the two researchers that coined the term. Yep. Okay,
where I know that there's going to be a lot of listeners in our series that are going to be interested in this. Where can they go, or where can they tune into to get a little bit more information on PTG?
Yeah, so there's a lot of information. If you just Google post-traumatic growth, there's a lot of great information that comes up. Rich is retired now from the University of North Carolina in Charlotte. And he's actually sitting as our distinguished chair at the Boulder Crest Institute for Post-Traumatic Growth. So you can see that at bouldercrestinstitute.org. And Rich's bio is there, and we have some resources up on that website as well. But happy, obviously to reach out. Josh Goldberg runs the Institute. Reach out to Josh via the contact sheet on our website, and he can get you just about anything you need.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Ken, I'm so glad that you guys have, stuck with us with the network, and that you're supporting this first responder mental health initiative. That means the world to me, coming from a family with a lot of first responders in it. And I'm glad that we get a refresher from you on what's going on. You just gave the website so people know where to go. And also they can just go to strugglewell.com to get information about the book.
Yes, thank you very much. I'm really honored. My dad left the Army in 1960 and became a cop here in Washington, D.C. until my mom died. He actually stayed on for a couple of years after my mom died. But I grew up, in the family of first responders. We've had a lot of first responders. After the Vegas shooting, we actually opened up our Warrior Path program at Boulder Crest Retreat to first responders. And we've had some really interesting guys come through who were involved in the disco shooting in Orlando, the school shooting in Parkland, Florida, the Vegas shooting. So, we believe in it. These are communities that are so aligned and just struggling. Military's 20 veterans a day taking their own lives. I think last year I read law enforcement officers had over 700 suicides. So
Yes.
we're here and we want to help.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, thank you again. And we will have you on again. Listeners, I want to make sure too that you can tune into Ken's show. You can go to any of your favorite podcast app, iTunes, and just type in Struggle Well and you'll find the show. It's fantastic. And again, Ken, thanks so much.
Thanks, Kristin. Thanks, Barry.
Yeah, thank you. Pleasure.
Pleasure. Bye-bye.
Sometimes I'm passive aggressive, but never without good intentions. I heat up and act on my emotions.
Thanks so much for listening to Mental Health News Radio. Our podcast can be found on iTunes, Stitcher, and hundreds of other podcast apps, or you can visit our website at mentalhealthnewsradio.com. If you have a question or would like to be a guest, become a podcaster on our network, or join the amazing organizations that help keep us on the air, please email us at info@mhnrnetwork.com. Get ready for that special goodbye from our resident therapy dog, Miles, and a special thanks to Emily Sohn for letting us use her incredible song, Cordial, for our podcast music. Listen to the full song on SoundCloud at emily.sonne.
Don't be surprised when I don't hate on you. After all, we promised we'd be cordial. Sometimes in you I can fight it, but I oppose it.
Good boy.